Mr. Hosemann, thank you for joining us on
Good, glad to be here.
At Issue. Let me start by asking, what's your education plan and how do you plan to pay for it?
Well, we have a pretty large one. We're going to start with teachers' pay raises every year. For some reason, we've gotten into a habit of funding them the last year. And what happens is we balance it off the budget at that time, so it gets decreased, quite frankly. The whole education budget does. We're going to fund all of our collaboratives right away. Those are our pre-K collaboratives. There's about 9,000 children that are not in any form of daycare anywhere in Mississippi. And we only funded 19 of those collaboratives last year. So you'll see us fund, I think there were 50 applications last year. I think that's really planting the seeds of the future there, and we need to have pre-K in Mississippi. So you'll see us funding that as well. Then we underfunded our special kids. Our special children really need some assistance, and I think there's about 24 to $28 million to fund special education in Mississippi. Those are my top 3 priorities to start. Now, there are others as we go forward. Now, how we pay for them is we have 200 agency boards and commissions in Mississippi. We want to right-size our government, and so it's really built from the individual up, not from the state down. Our state government's kind of like kudzu, wasn't it? It's just spread all over, and I think it's time to go back and look at it. We have asked every one of our agencies, we will ask next year to reduce their budget by 1%, 1 cent of every dollar. Now, we'll exclude education from that, child protective services, the judiciary, some exclusions, but the remaining part of those, by excluding that 1%, we'll be able to give a 3 cents per employee, 3% raise to every state employee, and we'll be able to help pay for the things that I've just outlined to you.
Just based on the 1% cut
for the 1% cut, plus right-sizing the government. And I want to give you an example of it. I've cut my budget just about every year I've been there.
As Secretary of State.
As Secretary of State. And our budget this year that I requested was less than the day I started 12 years ago. And I just turned back $1.5 million to the general fund. We can do that. We can make sure that our state agencies are efficient and run efficiently and are in their lane, what they're supposed to be doing. So I think you'll see between things like the 1% cut, right-sizing our government, they'll pay for our education. And we have some growth. Obviously, we have growth every year, but we'll be able to pay for all of the things that I just outlined to you. Our state employees, we talk about our teachers, and education is a really important part of this, but you need to understand, like when I was in Parchman just several weeks ago and visiting with the guards up there, they make $27,000, $28,000 a year. That's their salary, and their take-home may not be less than $2,000 a month. Now, for that, they guard 3,000 of the hardest criminals we got. Mental health workers, very similar to that. We've got many needs in Mississippi on compensation, and I think unless we pay people now, where they've got other opportunities, our economy's good, we have virtual full employment, unless we pay our state employees a reasonable wage, we can't expect to keep them. So we have this continual turnover, which is the most expensive thing in running a business. I intend to run Mississippi's government like we run a business.
What about MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program? Do you like it? What would you change about it? What do you think is good or bad about it?
I looked at it, and I think it's fine. The problems were we hadn't funded our special kids. We excluded that. And so I think that's one of the examples of funding we will do. I don't want to sit here and tell the citizens of Mississippi we're going to fully fund the MAEP next year. I'm going to tell you we'll get a lot closer than we did this year, and the next year we'll get a lot closer to that. And I hope by the end of our 4-year period that we'll be right on the bucket for funding education fully, not only our special needs kids, but our teachers and the others that are there. We can get there. We'll get there in Mississippi. It's going to take me a little while, a year or two, to right-size the government. Just hang with me as we go through that process. But I've cautioned our teachers and our other education and our people that work so hard in state government that they need to be very, very supportive of the fact that we're going forward with government reorganization, that we're going forward to right-size government. Because every dollar I save goes back into infrastructure and healthcare and, education.
You mentioned special needs students. What about the special needs vouchers? Your opponent is against expanding that voucher or scholarship program that takes some public school money, gives it to families to go and spend on another private school perhaps, or another institution that can address their special needs if they believe that institution could do it better.
Yeah,
Are you in favor of that?
No, I don't think we expand vouchers. I've never really said that. I think he'd like to say that, but I didn't. Let me tell you what I am in favor of, and I want to be real clear about this. In many of our schools, we do not have adequate coverage for special needs kids. Autistic children are not getting what is federally mandated by the law. They're supposed to be getting the same things that we get, or a program designed so that they can reach their potential. Not only is it federally mandated to me, it's morally mandated. That's what we ought to be doing as a state, is making sure those children, every teacher that I talk to says it's about the child. So, where a public school is not providing what I think is federally mandated by law or morally mandated by our community, by our citizens, that child needs to move to another public school. If there's no public school within the reach of that child, then it needs to go to a special purpose school. And there's several of those that teach autistic children, for example. Those autistic children have the greatest opportunity to mainstream between age 4 and age 8. So you can't leave them in a public school which is searching for some special educator. They can't get that. They can't provide what that child needs. And we're not going to hold that child back for that one purpose because that school can't deliver what's federally mandated and morally mandated to me. So we only have a narrow opportunity. We can't just wait for a school to catch up. In that interim period until they do, and I'm going to fund special education, so I hope they catch up quickly. In that interim period, yeah, I think our children ought to have the right to go somewhere else. That does not include a parochial school, which doesn't have the expertise. It doesn't include home schools. It includes schools like Oxford, where Whitney is awesome. Oak Grove in Lamar County, other ones that I've been to that are superior in delivering this kind of service. That's where we want them to go. If they can't go there, then we'll go to a single purpose school. But we won't be funding parochial schools and home schools and things like that that don't give that child the expertise that we need.
But you envision a public school system that can meet these needs on its own, where there wouldn't be a need for the vouchers.
If public education doesn't work, Wilson, nothing works. So what I envision is that all public schools will have the ability to deliver these services. In this interim period, till we can get them there, I'm not going to leave a child uneducated because the school couldn't do it. You know, it's a federal law, and I think it's a moral obligation.
What about the opportunity gap? Do you have plans to reduce the opportunity gap between low-income students and high-income students, black students and white students?
Opportunities should be equal in Mississippi, and they will be equal in Mississippi. I'll tell you what we've got. We've got a skills gap. Only about 25% of our young men and women actually go get a college degree. So the other 75% need meaningful jobs. So what you will see us do is get the 12th year, that senior year in high school is going to be their first year in community college. It's going to be that first year where we have dual credit courses. Like I was in Gulfport the other day, and a young man coming out at 9 o'clock in the morning, I said, "Where are you going?" "Well, I'm going to community college." I said, "That's great, that's great. Have you finished?" "Oh, yes, sir, I finished right here." You know, I graduate from community college and high school the same day. That's not going to be strange anymore in Mississippi. And what we're going to do is look at career technical for these young men and women who don't want to get a college degree or can actually make more money without one. And those include like physical therapists, they include plumbers and electricians and others. You see this like in Pascagoula. I go to literally hundreds of these schools. I was in Ocean Springs yesterday, where they have these career tech. 21 of them are offered in Pascagoula High School. Physical therapy, welding, all kinds of different ones. Robotics are offered. In Ocean Springs yesterday, they have an aquaculture class where they're growing out of literally rocks and water with fish in it. They're growing vegetables, staggering, huge, large things. And so you give public education a chance to perform. It'll perform, but we're going to give young men and women economic alternatives to just getting a college degree. And that's going to close this gap. Like when I was in Leaksfield the other day, the welding class, which takes a year and a half, some in high school, some in the community college for Jones Community College, when they get out, they start at $35 to $40 an hour, plus benefits, 19 years old. And you know what else? They're living in that community. They're coming back to live in that county. So you don't have this brain drain going out. You have people who can drive for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, find a good paying job, and then come home at night.
But you run the risk of, in encouraging students to go to community colleges or attain that education while they're in high school, of reducing the number of students who go on to a four-year college. And
Not at all. And what you'll find, I think, is these young men and women need to be challenged more in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Like in Starkville, another public school, they're giving them academy homes, where in the 10th grade you start down a path. I want to be an electrician. I want to be a history professor. I want to be whatever. And they start the courses that they take in the 11th and 12th grade to reach that goal. Now, I would love to have us, the average in the country is 37% are college educated. In some countries like Korea, it's like 70 or 80% are college educated. So I would like to see our college education go up every year. We have a labor participation rate that's 55.7% in Mississippi. That's individuals from 16 to 65 that are working in the workforce. We're second lowest to West Virginia. During the 4 years I'm here, we intend to increase the labor participation rate about 1% a year. That's 20,000 more people working every year. These young men and women will select their own careers. It would be great for them all to have a college education, but it's not nearly necessary for them to have an economic good life.
How do you see, or do you see, a correlation between attaining a higher education and the state's economic development?
I do. I think, well, first of all, every person, there's been some studies about this. What economic basis makes you happy? You know, if you make $70,000 a year, do you happy? Or you make $100,000 a year, or $50,000? And there's different places that people reach where they're satisfied with their economics. So I want every citizen to make their own choice. Now, I will tell you, a plumber in Jackson during the winter, as you well know, when the pipes are all breaking, they make a lot more than the Secretary of State does. So if you were saying, I want to make a decision whether to be Secretary of State or a plumber, I'd say be a plumber. You make more money. So each person, if you're giving them the skill set and the exposure to different alternatives and opportunities, they'll reach the conclusion that the one that makes them satisfied with their lives. Some people like to work with their hands. Like we've been holding these seminars, Wilson, around in Columbus and Hattiesburg and Meridian and Clinton. We go and we bring businesses into the schools and the junior colleges. We all sit them together and we say, look, you're educating this child. Every education leads to workforce. When you're educated, it leads to the work, leads to a job. So we want to have these children have the exposure to be a welder or electrician or a plumber or these other things. That may make them very satisfied, and by the way, may make them more money than a college graduate. It's up to them. I think we have a great university system, a fantastic community college system. They'll rise to this challenge, not only to be a precursor to getting a less expensive college education, but an opportunity to do things other than the college education. I think that's really important.
Does that ultimately help the state's economy?
Without question. The more people we have working, the more money we're going to have. If I can get that labor participation rate from 55 to 60%, 55.7 up a year to 60% in the next 4 years, we don't have health care problems. They have coverage by health insurance. We don't have tax problems because they're making more money. All things work when people have a job and the economy is going well, and we want to continue to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about racial disparities in outcomes for students in Mississippi. High school graduation rates, third grade reading scores, kindergarten preparedness. How can you reduce the racial disparities in those benchmarks?
There are a couple of things. The first one I've already talked to you about. I need to start earlier. You know, we have to be realistic about what's happening. Our unwed mothers, I know Governor Bryant's been just working hard. He and Ms. Bryant have been working hard on conveying what happens if you're an unwed mother and you're 16 years old or 17 years old. What are the consequences of that? So I know they've worked hard on doing that. But when we have those children, that's why I'm so think it's so critical to have pre-K. The earlier I can start that child in that education component, every teacher I talk to, first grade, second grade, third grade, reading grade, says yes, if you have a good pre-K, They're coming out of a good, and there are parochial pre-Ks, there's others other than just public school pre-Ks. But if you have a good pre-K education, your chances of going through the third grade reading gate are exponentially higher. So to me, you start with pre-K, giving every citizen, I don't care race, color, creed, national origin, whatever, that doesn't matter. You give every single one of those children the same equal opportunity at the earliest possible age. And I think that will level the playing field for everyone.
And to help pay for that, you talked about this 1% cut for all these agencies with some exceptions in the state. What's the lieutenant governor's role, or what? How, as lieutenant governor, could you make that happen?
Well, under Mississippi's Constitution of 1890, we have a weak form of governor. And for whatever reason, they left the powers in the speaker and the lieutenant governor. We appoint all the committee chairmen. We appoint the appropriations chairman. Bills don't come up unless the lieutenant governor and the speaker say they do. And that's just a political reality of what we have in Mississippi. We have a weak form of governor and a strong form of legislature. That's going to be helpful, I think, for me to achieve what I'm telling you. And I would remind you, when y'all hired me 12 years ago, I told you we would have voter ID. I told you we would make the Secretary of State's office better. Our budget's less than the day it is. I told you we would automate everything. We take 700,000 documents there, no papers in the last 4 years. I told you we'd answer the phone. We answer 65,000 phone calls a year. 98% of them I get a report every Monday. We answer with a live person that's happy you called. We passed an autism bill. There'd never been one before. We drafted that, and the legislature passed it. So everything I've ever said we were going to do has come to fruition. And if you hire me in November, what I'm telling you today will come to fruition.
Let's talk a little bit about education leadership. And you mentioned the committees and such, and even at the State Board of Education. Do you see at this point any changes you would like to make in any of that leadership, either in the legislature or at the State Department of Education?
Department of Education, the head of it is hired by the board, and the board is appointed by the lieutenant governor and the governor. So when I get my appointments, you should assume that I want them to be indicative of my thoughts on how education ought to be operated in Mississippi. I cannot directly hire or fire someone over there, but on my board appointments, you should assume that they're going to be very interested in pre-K, very interested in college and career technical, and very interested in our children.
What about in the legislature?
How do you mean in the legislature?
As far as the committee appointments.
Oh yeah, I have made no recommendations to anybody. I think the first thing, of course, is to get hired. After that, the typical process that I would use, I think like anybody that's interviewing for a job, I want to talk to all 52 of my senators. And I want to ask, what would you like to do? That's usually a good precursor of what really gets done. I'd like to ask, what would you like to do? Then what is your skill set? You know, it's no use in putting somebody in something they know nothing about. I would prefer to put people in positions that they have some indication. So people that are in education would be more likely to be in education on our committees, and the same people who are CPAs would be on our appropriations committees. And so you'd see, I think, some personal skill sets. While we have a very diverse Senate coming back this year, I think we have 16 or so new members that'll be there. I think we'll have a really good cross-section to be able to appoint our chairman and our co-chairman in each one of them. It's a very big job, by the way, and that's one of the biggest ones I think you do as a lieutenant governor is to pick your chairman. So I'll spend most of November and December working on that.
Well, thank you for sharing all your thoughts on education. We want to give you an opportunity to address just a few other areas of concern to a lot of voters. Let's talk about Medicaid expansion. What you think is would be good with it, what would be bad about it, and what you would do to make sure that all Mississippians have access to quality and affordable health care.
Well, we've been pretty busy with that lately. I have met with the Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, met with the individuals who drafted their provisions, met with the individuals who's running it right now, actually the Arkansas model, also in the Indiana model on expanding health care and coverage of health care. Met with the Hospital Association. They proposed one way in which to bridge the gap in cost. I'm very leery of a single payer system. I think everything is on the table for me. I think it's a good time to take a look at all of how we do healthcare. No citizen should be further than 30 minutes away from an emergency room, so our rural hospitals have to survive. Many of them have already gone under the wing of University of Mississippi Medical Center, Forest General, Gulfport. They've all kind of adopted these outlying hospitals to keep them vibrant, and we need to keep them vibrant. So that's very important to me that we have access to that. I think healthcare begins when you wake up. You will see the state start a process that we haven't done before. Not just when you're sick, how quick can I get to a doctor? That oftentimes is much more expensive and a less healthy result. So what you'll see us doing is doing things like promoting the wellness part, not just that you're taking your meds, but the whole wellness part. And I can tell you some examples of hospitals that have done this. Tallahatchie, in Charleston, Mississippi. It's a 14-bed hospital in a 3,000 person town. 14 swing beds, it has emergency room, primary care, it has a beautiful wellness center next to it that's become the social center of the town. Very important. So not only the ones that are sick, but they're coming there in the mornings, they see their friends and neighbors. They even look at people with diabetes and they'll send them what to eat for the week online. And they have part of it is a school where they show them how to cook. So there's a lot of things that I'm very interested in. The expansion of healthcare is a $6 billion decision. And as you can tell, I'm spending a lot of time on it, but I don't want to do it wrong. During this first year, we will look very closely at what our coverage is, particularly for working Mississippians. They need health insurance. I am not hung up on a moniker. You can call it whatever you want to call it. What I call it is that health care is there for every Mississippian. So I think you will see changes. Probably not dramatic ones in January or something like that, but there are parts of it I think could be done better and provide working people with insurance coverage, and others. The single payer system is really a no-go, I think. It will handicap all of us. And then the other thing, when people are working, I would like for them to contribute some to the cost of health care. Maybe not as much as I have under my state plan, but they have to have some skin in the game, I think. So I think those are two kind of bulwarks I want to stay with. But the rest of it, there's a lot of opportunities, not only the hospital plan, but the Arkansas plan, the Indiana plan. And then we have a president who likes to make a deal. So we probably were going to come up with the Mississippi plan, which will be different than the others, but it'll build on the mistakes they made and maybe the successes they had.
Infrastructure. We've been hearing a lot about roads and bridges in this campaign, and the fact that so many have been closed in Mississippi because they've been deemed unsafe. How do you think that affects economic development, and what would you do? What's your infrastructure plan?
Yeah, it does affect economic development. It affects, we're harvesting right now. So we have trucks that got to go all the way around, harvest machines that we've got, John Deere's that have to drive around and can't get over one or the other. I think there are 436 that I last looked at, 436 bridges out in Mississippi. About 150 of them are weight restricted and the others are just out. And when I looked at it, only 4 of those were actually on state roads. So as I visioned this, it came to me that the counties are what need the money, not necessarily the state. So why tax everybody across the state on a dollar amount when it may be just the counties or a specific county that may need this? So I'm going to propose that the counties have the ability to put on a use tax from 2 to 6 cents for a specific purpose. And the Board of Supervisors would say, we're going to fix the bridge on Cane Creek Road or something like that, and we need this much dollars, and so we're going to implement a gas tax in Madison County for this amount of money. It would be sunsetted when that bridge was fixed. So you could bring it back up for vote. It would take a popular vote for people to do that. So Board of Supervisors would put it on the election. We would vote one way or another to have that additional tax for that specific purpose. It'd have to go into the dirt and the bridges. It couldn't go for machinery or salaries or just go away. And our state auditor would audit that along with our MDOT people. So we would be able to look at the bridges that are out in counties and give them supplemental money. Now they're getting $80 million a year, hopefully, from our lottery. They got $250 million this year from bond. All that stays the same. There's a road and bridge a grant that comes out of the state. It's been about 10 or 15 million a year. That stays the same. But what this will give is additional funds for specific counties without having to tax everybody for specific bridges and infrastructure. And I think you'll find the counties and the public are willing to pay for things that they can see what's going to happen, not just something that goes to Jackson. Wilson, if anything I've learned about going all over the state of Mississippi, Mississippi's run in the counties, not in the capital. That's where we need to direct these funds. That's who needs to have hold of them. So you'll see, I think, on a lot of things, me going back to county management. In the old days, when you didn't have broadband or something like that, maybe counties needed more help from Jackson or more expertise in one area than the other. But I think right now, we've got plenty smart enough people in the counties to run them. We just need to make sure they're economically feasible.
At the same time, you do have MDOT saying that on state roads, there is not enough money to keep maintaining what we've got, or at least there's only enough to do that and not enough to expand or do what needs to be done in the future. So there seems to be a need on the state level as well, statewide. How do you feel that gap?
We've had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings with MDOT in which we spent a lot of times looking into their budget. Once we have the main problem that people are concerned about is they can't get out on the county road to work, or the school bus can't go, or we can't get my crops in. I mean, that's what they're really interested in. Then when I came back, we have an interest in new highways, and we're going to fund new highways out of our existing budget when I get a hold of it. I just told you my budget's less than the day I started. I just turned back $1.5 million. There are places we need new highways in Mississippi. I will tell you, from New Albany to Ripley, the largest manufacturer of furniture in Mississippi has a 2-lane road going there. There's 21 miles of it left to be undone. There are other roads that go over in North Mississippi to keep our Tier 1 suppliers there for automobile factories that are being built in Huntsville. There are some on the coast, for example. There's some in central Mississippi that need to be done. We'll select those. The engineers in MDOT will select the ones that need additional expansion. Those we're going to start in an organized fashion, doing 1 or 2 a time a year. We don't have to build out everything. Our maintenance fund is sufficient, in my opinion, to maintain Mississippi's highways, and I think you'll see that. They've been expanding. On 35, on others are building new bridges out of these funds already. So I'm a little leery of saying we don't have enough money until such time as I got a handle on the budget.
Tell me what distinguishes you from your opponent.
I think I've been in government. Well, first of all, I started a business. You know, I came here, my wife and I came here, and just started from scratch. You know, when we first came, we came over from college, all we had was a car with a TV set, some gifts, and a student loan. And we had to turn the car back into the airport, so we had to hitchhike the first month to work. We started out with just us, you know. So since then, I've had my own real estate business. I've built buildings, I've built subdivisions and houses. I've been a lawyer, I think apparently successful. Other lawyers voted me the 18 years in a row as the best lawyers in Mississippi. And I was honored to have that. That's your peers voting you for that. Then I decided I thought the Secretary of State needed some upgrading to the things that I was doing with businesses. So I got into that for 12 years. Almost all the legislation that I ever proposed and drafted passed bipartisan. When I first started, the Democrats controlled the House and the Republicans the Senate. So we had an experience of getting things through the legislature in a bipartisan way. I think when you add all that experience up, when I tell you we can do something like this, just like voter ID, not getting sued by anybody, we can work through just about every issue. I believe in the aggregate intellect. And you'll see me on every issue, healthcare, infrastructure, all the things, education that we talked about. People with competing interests sitting around a table working out what's best for Mississippi. I've done that 12 years here, 30 years in the bar, and in private business. I think that experience will allow us to achieve everything I'm telling you.
Delbert Hosemann, thank you very much.
It's really good to visit. Thank you for taking time today.
All right, thank you.